Hetepu, Namaste, Haru Nefer. This is Kasankma Keparu with another video for you. And in this video, I want to talk about Egypt and ancient alien theories. But before I do that, hit the like button on this video. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live or when I upload recorded videos. And if you haven't already, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. We have a lot going on there. As a supporter, you get exclusive access to instructional videos on meditation, invoking spirits, how to do oracle readings, how to communicate with interdimensional beings, and hypnosis videos. And you can become a Patreon supporter for as little as $1, $5, $20 a month. It's up to you. You can cancel at any time. Lastly, please share this video with family and friends. So, Huru Nefer, how are you? Today we have an interesting subject I want to talk about. I want to apologize because we did a really great broadcast today on King Akhenaten or Amenhotep IV and Queen Nefertiti, the most beautiful, beautiful one. And YouTube took it down because it has some copyright issues. So I'll do another broadcast covering that same topic in the future because I covered some very important touch points in that video that you need to be aware of if you're going to be a devout practitioner of the Kemetic religion. It's important that you get in the know on certain things relating to our past and relating to our history. But right now, let's talk about a little bit about ancient aliens and ancient Egypt. You know, one of the things that we have to deal with, unfortunately, living in this fourth dimensional plane of existence that we're in, is racism. And it seems to raise its ugly head every now and then. And I can recall going to school, going to film school, and having to deal with it. And no one can really understand it or walk in your shoes. But when you come from a very rich culture and that's snatched away from you, and then it's not only snatched away from you, but it's perverted, you kind of get a little bit upset. You get a little rallied, you know. But we are Osirians, so we're always Amen. We're at peace. Amen, of course, is the top of the tree of life. The Kemetic tree of life is the state of the hidden, that which cannot be perceived. That is your true essence. You are no thingness. You are no thing, nothing. You cannot be felt. You cannot be heard. You cannot be smelled. You're immaterial. You don't exist in any one fixed point in space and time. You are everywhere. You are a multidimensional being. You have infinite number of lives that you're going to live. You have always been and always will be. So we understand that this challenge or opportunity that we're facing in this fourth dimensional plane is the agreement that we made with Tha or Tuhuti, because we need to help the planet transition to a new vibrational frequency. And to do that, we have to solve this problem of racism so that the information can be gone, uploaded, and stored into the galactic Akashic records. And I say galactic because every living being, physical and metaphysical, has access to the Akashic records. And our ancestors knew that. And that's why some information in the Akashic records are protected by mantras. And you must know those mantras in order to open the gateway to download that knowledge and information. Now, one of the things I dealt with in the previous broadcast was archaeologists or grave robbers, if you want to call them, like Howard Carter, who robbed the grave of Tutankhamun. You know, these individuals, these archaeologists that come along, and remember, this is one of the only fields that there is. Well, actually, it is the only line of study that has really developed into a field in and of itself. Egyptology. There's nothing else like it. There's no Europetology. There's no Africantology, you know. So they know that there is a lot of occult wisdom, magic, science that our ancient ancestors practiced, and they're trying their best to decode that information, to get that information from the tombs and temples of ancient Kemet or Egypt. And remember, the Egyptians called themselves the Kamu, and the Kam is the etymologic root of the Hebrew term Hamand, or the son of Ham, meaning black, and they called Egypt Kemet, land of the black people. So very obvious. So and if you go look at the temple's walls, unless you're blind, you can see that they were of dark skin pigmentation hue. And we know that in that hot climate environment, that the climate creates an adaptation. What is that? An adaptation means that if you're there, you will have dark skin. That's how it has to be, because you develop in conjunction or in alignment with your environment, with your climate. That is the law of Ma'at, the interdependence and interrelationship. And same for people in Europe who are developing in that cold climate, they develop light skin pigmentation. And along with that pigmentation, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong now. Let's make sure that we correct these people, that they talk all about phenotype. They talk about the melanin content, but do not forget that along with the development of the physical attributes, wide nose, coarse hair, dark pigmentation of skin, there is the development of the brain, which dictates the perspective on life. You are in a hot, warm climate like the Sahara, you will develop more as a right brain person. If you're in a colder climate like in Europe, you will develop a left brain dependency. And there are reasons for that, which I outlined in previous videos. So we know that our ancient ancestors were integrated brain thinkers, or predominantly right brain thinkers. And this afforded them the opportunity to advance in culture, advance in knowledge. Because when you merge the left and right hemisphere of the brain, you produce geniuses. You produce the zenith of civilization. And now we know through our investigations that Egypt and Atlantis were not the only high cultured civilizations, that the planet at one point was peppered with advanced civilizations. But this knowledge has been hidden and covered up. But slowly there are good paleontologists, archaeologists out there, historians out there, scholars who are unearthing the truth. And despite their colleagues' racist perspective, they are standing up for truth and putting the information out to be consumed by the masses. And they risk being ostracized for talking about the truth. Now, the one thing I want to tackle is this whole concept about how the pyramids were built by aliens, and they point to 1350, which is the dynastic rule of Amenhotep IV, or Akhenaten. Now, he exhibited very strange traits physically: elongated head, fat distributed in his body and in really weird places. So they concluded that the elongated heads were an attribute of aliens, and that his family specifically are from an alien race, and that the human race was created by aliens called the Anunnaki. So what this does is it really takes the idea of, and oh wait, I have to get a little bit deeper. Let me go deeper on this. Disclaimer: I am not one who subscribes to racist doctrines, racist stereotypes. I seek to tell the truth. So what they do is they point to a couple. It's very imaginative what they do. They know that early civilization was barbaric. And I remember being in lectures where they would talk about early man was barbaric and try to conquer the world. We have evidence of this just by looking at the Greek and Roman civilization. And I say, I would always raise my hand and go, excuse me, yes, I do agree when you say barbaric, but can you really like hone in on that and get a little more detailed when you say barbaric? Oh yes, we mean the Greek and Roman civilizations, specifically Rome and others, and very early man. I said, oh yeah, excuse me. Can we get a little bit deeper into that? You see, I'm looking for you to admit the truth, because you're saying things in a very generalized term. So let me say it for you. You see, in Europe, there was a lot of barbaric things going on. Meanwhile, we have Africa, where we had the height of civilization. We had high morals. We had leaders who lived by Ma'at. They don't want to hear that. So they're like, "Sir, can you leave?" All right. But it's true. If you do the timeline, you will see that early in man's development, you'll see that in Africa, civilization had reached a level of high art, high culture, high morality, high technology. It wasn't barbaric. Now, they kind of explain this to get around the fact that instead of approaching this from a very objective scientific perspective, saying, well, you have to understand that that aggressiveness, that trait that is within us that is aggressive, was needed living in a colder climate for survival. That is absolutely 100% true. But what they want to say is they come along and say, well, you see, these aliens came and they tampered with our DNA and it made us more violent and more barbaric. And then I go, excuse me, when you say tamper with the DNA, can you be a little more specific about that? Who are you talking about? DNA? Are you talking about Europeans? Are you talking about Africans' DNA? Who did they tamper? Because there was no need to tamper with African DNA, because civilization, there was civilization. They were very civil people. So their claim is that, okay, well, Europe was populated by very civil people, but these aliens came and tampered with the DNA and made them more aggressive. This is not coming from real science. This is coming from those in the conspiracy theory arena, the New Age arena, because those in real science know that you develop in accordance with your environment, in accordance with the climate. So if you're in Europe and it's cold, you're going to develop more of an aggressive trait for survival, more of an individualistic trait, more left brain. Whereas in Africa, you can develop in a very different way. And let me explain. One is not better than the other. One is not better than the other. It's all about survival, and the best adapt survives. So God, in her infinite power and wisdom, endowed the energies to have us conform and adapt to the environment so that the human race would survive. Okay. This is why when we say human, we say hue, of hue, color, human, because there technically is really one race, which is the race of melanated, dark skin complexion. That is the race. Everything out of that sprang out of Africa. Let me go back. There's the great continent of Pangaea. Then life began in Africa, in the Great Lakes regions. Then they migrated outward, spread up to Europe, where they adapted to the colder climate, losing pigmentation, becoming more left brain dependent. So you have our offspring adapting, or our ancestors, depending on how you look at it, adapting to the environment so that they could survive. So when you look at Asians, whites, Latino, Muslim, we're all the same family, originating back to the first fossil that Louis Leakey and his wife, I think her name is Mary Leakey, found the oldest fossil, and in her African name is Degnish. So actually, it was a great find. It made like Time magazine and everything. So let me just look that up really quick, Louis, because I want to know I want to make sure I get his wife right out of respect for her, because He's a British paleontologist, and he's Mary. Yeah, I was right. Her name is Mary Leakey. So they found the oldest fossil, which is more than likely, which they know was pigmented. She was dark skinned. They found that fossil in Africa. Okay, I digress. Sorry. All right, going back to what I was saying before. So they come up with these wild things about aliens tampering with the DNA to make man or human more aggressive, which is why we are the way we are today, which is warlike, barbaric. But again, when we say we, we've got to qualify that and say, what do you mean by we? Because Africa had civilization. And there, yes, there were wars, but that was nothing in comparison to what we have now, especially when you look at slave trading based on skin color, which is relatively new to the planet, you know, and racism is a concocted, constructed virus that was put together by the ruling elite to keep people from the knowledge of right brain thinking. So what I want to clear up so that we can dispel and do away with these rumors about if aliens built the pyramids or were responsible for advanced ancient cultures. And to that, well, let me go back to what I was saying before. The reason they introduced this is because very early on, you see the field of specifically Egyptology comes out of the Semitic scholars. They had to find a way to tie the Bible into Egypt to make it legitimate. So what they wanted, they looked at, when they began to look at Egypt, it was very evident from early on that these were not pale white people from Europe. It was very obvious. So they had to do something to change that. So they concocted the lie that Egypt was a white civilization. And then they took Egypt out of Africa and said, well, Egypt is in Northeast Africa or the Middle East, is more like what they want to say. So to take this further, they then said, hey, these aliens came, and this is why the civilization is so advanced. Now, these so-called scholars knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing because they had a problem on their hands of global proportions. That if you attribute Egypt to black people, then you have to admit that civilization was created by these same indigenous people. And that was tricky. That was a tricky thing for them. They didn't want to admit that. So it's better to work with conspiracy theorists, New Age movement, to say, you know what? It's a possibility that they had alien contact, and that's what helped them. We know from understanding the data that the reason that Egypt was able to do the wonders that it did is because they were integrated brain thinkers. That's it. And admitting this and understanding this is the salvation to the planet. You see, the planet is trapped in left brain thinking, which is retarding the progress of the planet. The way we learn in modern day universities is backwards, is all hell. Egyptian priests would look at us and how we're learning and the way we're going about things and would just simply break down and cry because it's so pathetic. You learn through the right brain. That's the seat of learning. That's the seat of memory. The left brain is not in charge of learning, but that's how we are taught in schools through verbal discourse, going back to the Roman and Greek cultures. Anyway, when we come and admit this truth, and there are some really good, um, some of those, a lot of those Semitic scholars really did some good stuff in exposing the truth and bringing it to light. So things are changing for the better now. And if this can become mainstream, if people begin to realize that the problems that we're having in the modern world are due to the process of thinking through the left brain and not integrated brain thinking, if we begin to realize that and understand that, it's going to literally change the vibration, the frequency of the planet overnight. And we have to get there. And that is the most important thing. And I remember when I was studying with a lot of other individuals, and we were studying ancient Egypt, and they were so into it. They were reading the books, and they were getting into this and getting into that. I had a problem with what they were doing because they were very well learned and they could regurgitate information, but there was no application of the Egyptian mystery system. And I felt that they were lost because then when you looked at the habits, some smoked, some ate meat, some did this, did that. I didn't think it was in accordance with Ma'at. So I said, I've got to divorce myself of these groups because they're not following in a tradition of our ancestors, of the priests of ancient Kemet. You see, they were doing the exact same thing that they were crying wolf over. In other words, they were saying how terrible Western education system was, but teaching and learning in the exact same way as the Western education system, but just simply saying, putting a different shade of color on it. That doesn't do anything. You've got to revamp and revolutionize the whole system of learning to take it back to the ancient temples of Kemet and how they taught people in the mystery schools for 40 years. And I remember when I was in priesthood and the woman was sitting there reading a book and it talked about this other woman interdimensionally traveling. And I was fascinated when she was telling me about this. So what book is that? And I was like, is that even possible to travel interdimensionally? She goes, well, this woman did it. And at that point, I realized that I wasn't getting enough. I had reached a level of where I thought it was time for me to move on. So I said, I've got to explore. So the answer to this question of did aliens have any influence in ancient Kemet? The one thing I can tell you from my studies in the occult and in magic is that from my experience in working with spirits, communicating with interdimensional beings, astral projecting through the universe, what I can tell you from my experience is that the ancient Kemetic people knew of existence of life out there, ET life out there, and that they did communicate with extraterrestrial life. Now, of course, we look and we say, well, where's the rocket ships? We have to get out of that left brain thinking, and that's what's really crippling us. We think so much through that left brain that we don't understand. And let me take this a little bit further. We know that time is not linear, and I don't have time to go into it, but time is not linear. In fact, we know that there's no such thing as the past or the future, that the only thing that exists is the present now moment, and that the decisions that you make now actually affect and impact your past. When you do something in the now moment, you change your past. We also understand that, well, that we need to get into an understanding of that life can exist beyond the physical. You see, NASA's sending out space probes. They are sending out a probe to Pluto. It's going to get there about 2-3 years. That's one of the fastest they have. And NASA claims to be looking for life. And I don't know if you know what NASA stands for, but it stands for never a straight answer. Anyway, so these images that NASA is beaming back to you from Mars, from Pluto, from Jupiter, I'm going to just tell you, NASA's the biggest liar on the planet. They know they found life, and these pictures that they're sending you are just deflections. All right, so let's get that understanding there. All right, and because you know for a fact if they found life, they would not tell you. They would keep it secret, which is what they're doing. And it doesn't matter if it's microbes or intelligent life, they're not going to tell us. It took them a long time to admit that there may be water on Mars. All right. Anyway, let's get back into what I was saying. When we think about the search for intelligent life, we always think about the physical. That's a left brain thing because the left brain only thinks concretely. This is why we have to get to right brain thinking, because right brain includes the metaphysical, the abstract. Life can exist in not a physical way, in a metaphysical way. And we are not even looking at that. We have the program SETI, which is looking for sounds from space, as if they're going to beam radio frequencies out there for us to detect them and decode them. There is metaphysical life that we can encounter and communicate with, but because we're trapped in left brain thinking, that's not even consideration of NASA. So when we look at traveling through the solar system, we look at doing it in conventional rocket vehicles, which we know are limited. In fact, the fastest rockets that we have, what was it? The Apollo 12 took about 3 days to get to the moon. The fastest rocket we have, I'm not sure if it's ion propulsion or whatever, can get us from here to the moon in 6 hours, here to Pluto in 2 years. Now, if we were to want to go to the nearest star system, the nearest star, that would take us 50,000 years. If we wanted to go to Andromeda, and let's say we could travel at light speed, it would take us 2 million years to get there. So why am I telling you that? I'm telling you that because there's a limitation when you think in terms of the left brain. Conventional thinking, like in Star Trek with the warp drive, goes shh, is linear. It's starting at point A, ends at point Z. It's linear. And they map out a course that avoids asteroids, planets, black holes, and things of that nature. We now understand that there's a possibility of natural wormholes, that when you go in the wormhole, it can take you to the other side of the galaxy. But we also understand that there's a possibility of actually bending space-time. If you want to go here and you start out here, we can fold that and you're there instantaneously, okay? But that's, again, thinking in terms of concrete thinking, left brain, physical. When you start to incorporate the idea of who you really are is consciousness. You are not a physical being. You're not a physical body. You're only encased in the physical body to experience the 4D realm. Does that make sense? And there's no way to experience the 4D realm but through putting consciousness in this shell. But consciousness is not confined to this Geb body. So consciousness through key vibrational frequencies can separate from the body and travel the universe, travel interdimensionally. Now, it's a trick what I'm saying. Let me go back and say it again. When you find the right frequency, consciousness is released from the body and it can travel the universe, travel interdimensionally. And then you can come into contact with physical life or metaphysical life. But when you really get down to it and start to really understand what's going on here, you know that using the term travel is actually incorrect, because you're a 5D being. You're not a 4D being. 5D being does not have space and time. There's no space, there's no time. So there's nowhere to go. You already exist in all places and at all times. You're merely shifting your perspective to see it. So if I say I want to go to here and to Andromeda, and I know it takes about 2 million years to get there in a conventional ion propulsion rocket, I can travel, I can go there, my consciousness can go there, and I can be there, and I can observe it, and I can document it, and then I can come back. But really, I'm already there. So I'm telling you this because our ancestors were masters of frequency, of sound. This is how some theorize they cut stones, the limestones, to build the pyramids and moved them. And we know that they worked with different potions, medications like ayahuasca and DMT. So we knew that they traveled in the duat, the afterlife. They went and explored the afterlife with their consciousness. So why then is it such a leap to believe that they projected their consciousness to different celestial bodies? And I'm telling you they did. And it was the priesthood that were the holders of this information, the holders of this knowledge and wisdom. When you start to delve into right brain thinking, integrated brain thinking, or dual brain thinking, everything changes. A whole world of knowledge and opportunity opens to you. But the ruling elite know this. They are practicing it. They are already communicating with interdimensional beings. They know it. But their job now is to keep this information from mass consumption, to scare you and to make you think, ooh, opening a portal and my consciousness traveling to Andromeda, that's really freaky. No, it's not. It's a natural attribute of who you are. Just as your right arm is a natural part of your body, your consciousness can project itself anywhere you want to go. And there have been testimonies, there have been studies done to where science is now validating this. They had just did one experiment where they gave individuals ayahuasca, and the individuals projected their consciousness to different dimensions and met with beings. And they came back and they said, let's put this to the test. And they asked each of the subjects, could you draw the being that you met? And from the study, the people that were the subjects involved in the testing all drew the same similar beings. You don't all hallucinate the same being. You don't. This means that they actually are encountering something objectively real. We're not in tune with the universe. We are out of alignment. We have been lied and duped and trapped in left brain thinking so that we cannot achieve our full potential as God men and God women. There is no reason why we shouldn't be able to access the Akashic records and pull knowledge down to rebuild the pyramids. There's no reason why we should have to send metal crafts to Pluto. We should be able to consciously project ourselves there and take a look at it and say, oh, this is what it's like. It's darn cold out there, you know? And individuals that have encountered what they call as UFOs have all said the same thing. When I saw the glowing light in the sky, I looked up at it and it was consciousness looking back at me. And I theorize that those were beings who had projected their consciousness to travel here to this planet to see and to get to know us. And many people have studied this phenomena about these lights and these orbs, you know. So this is something to think about, that our ancestors had reached not only the height of technology, had strived morally to be godlike, but also knew the human makeup, knew how to break down the spirit and understand it and project it to any place in the universe, any dimension. Science is now validating all of this stuff. Quantum mechanics is telling us that, hey, you know what? There may in fact be extra dimensions, and you may have doppelgangers in those parallel worlds. Our ancestors told us this thousands of years ago. They left that information for us. So I want you to think about that. And let me just greet all the Magi's in the chat room. Kiana, Depu, Clifton, Namaste, Joseph, Haroon Nefer. All right, cool. Thank you for joining this broadcast, impromptu broadcast. I wanted to touch on this subject because I wanted to really get away with this idea that aliens came down and they built the pyramids. No, we were in contact with them and in communication with them. But what facilitated that communication was our own level of sophistication, our own level of understanding of the brain and integrated brain thinking, and how right brain thinking allowed us to access those different planets and dimensions and to communicate with those beings. But before that happened, we had to develop ourselves properly to be able to be in a position to project ourselves, to have that interaction, have that communion. Now, the task is for us, their descendants, is to replicate this, to say, you know what, this knowledge is not going to be lost. We're going to practice this. We're going to live this and keep it going. That's what we have to do. We have to keep this knowledge going and pass it on to your children and their children and their children. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. This is Kasak Ma Keparu, son of Maat and Tudi. My aunt is a beautiful goddess Heteru. Until my next video, Amun Ra.